they clearly have many issues. But if there's one that has to be addressed immediately, they need someone who can consistently slug. They need power in the middle of the lineup. This is according to Greg Amsinger. Cal Raleigh is a wonderful player, terrific defender, a switch-hitting catcher with a lot of power. It's hard to find that. You can't win if Cal Raleigh is your biggest home run threat when Julio Rodriguez is kind of slipping a bit. And I think he's going to bounce back in a big way this year. I think they need to have a player in the likes of Pete Alonso, Christian Walker. They need legitimate 30-homer slug. The reason I would lean towards overpaying Pete Alonso is because he consistently slugs. You don't want a Randy Arozarena type where you go, maybe he'll hit 35, maybe he'll hit 17. You want a guy whose back of the baseball card proves that all he does is hit homers. That guy is a necessity in the middle of that lineup, along with Cal Raleigh. And by the way, I just feel like those two would get along famously. Like, they're like best friends. They don't even know it yet, right? The polar bear and the big dumper.
So, their ability to develop pitching is fantastic. I mean, and even in the bullpen, they've really excelled. And I don't know, is it just a lack of awareness that, hey, we haven't been able to, develop at the same rate? Because it's such a disparity, Greg. And we feel like we're wasting all of this good pitching. And, it's all for naught.
Well, there are a couple of things in play here. Julio Rodriguez took the league by storm. Everyone that is a superstar year one, the league makes an adjustment. So we're going to see if he can make the adjustment to the adjustment in 2025. That's one. When you look at that division, and Albert Pujols and I have had lengthy conversations about it. Obviously, the A's are no longer in Oakland, but the Coliseum isn't exactly easy to hit a home run in. Anaheim, not exactly easy to hit a home run in. Globe Life now in Arlington, not exactly easy. You could say the same thing in Seattle. So those ballparks don't lend to having crooked numbers. It's not like going to, I get it. Houston, that's a bandbox in Minute Maid. But for the most part, those ballparks aren't easy. Then you look at who is leading your front office. And Jerry Dipoto, former reliever, a pitcher who's got that intellect, who can see what he needs to see, looks at numbers from that prism, is going to give an advantage when it comes to evaluating talent on the mound. I don't know who he's leaning on, and maybe it's Edgar Martinez, but who is he leaning on from the draft room, from the developmental stages in the minor leagues, to really assess position player talent, and specifically hitters? I mean, this has been the Mariners have been dealing this for quite a long time. And you go back to the Dustin Ackley experiment, where he was supposed to be the number one bat, but just never developed any kind of slug. And it's been going on and on and on. Where Ty France was supposed to win batting titles, it just didn't happen. They don't develop these guys offensively to be consistent forces. And I think at some point, while one aspect of your organization is thriving, you're going to have to address why it is you can't get consistent offensive slug for the Seattle Mariners. And whenever they figure that out, I mean, who knows? Maybe Boomstick, Nelson Cruz, has got some swings left in him in his 40s. He's like the last guy to do it. So they've got to figure out a way to assess young talent and recognize who could perform, not just in this ballpark, but in this division on a consistent basis.
They have shown a reluctance to spend the money that it would take to get that kind of player. So if they are going to put a self-imposed salary cap on themselves, Greg, do they then change the type of team that can succeed in a ballpark like T-Mobile, where it's not a power team, it's not a power lineup, it's a high on base, we're going to put the ball in, we're going to put the game in play, we're going to steal bases, we're going to be a problem on the base paths, we're going to do it with speed and contact. Do you sort of reverse course and say that's the kind of team that can succeed in this ballpark?
Yes and no. I have a hard time waving the white flag saying the Cleveland Guardians are just a better offense than the Seattle Mariners. Like, if I'm working for the Seattle Mariners, we can't put together a collection of hitters like the Cleveland Guardians. What? The Guardians' uptick in slug was dramatic from 2023 to 2024. It's not just because of Stephen Vogt. They used a completely different approach to hitting. It's a psychological thing. They weren't seeing as many pitches. They were attacking earlier in counts. I think there needs to be a reassessment of how Seattle Mariner baseball is offensively. I think that's number one. To me, it's paramount. But I will push back a little bit on whether or not they're going to stay in the same old mold of not spending money. The way this works is, there's an alphabet to how owners deal with losing or not reaching expectations. The manager goes first. Okay? Mm-hmm. He's already gone. If they don't reach expectations this year, I don't see how Jerry Dipoto withstands that. He's the next one in line. And to me, the number one skill of a front office executive, the president of baseball ops or the powerful GM of a certain team, is the relationship with the owner. And you have to get an owner to believe that a Pete Alonso is worth the $200 million that you're going to give him, that he's the missing piece. And if it doesn't work, it's on me. Like, that is the most difficult thing to do. Do you know who did that, in my opinion, at the highest level? It's not even Andrew Friedman. A.J. Preller has mastered this art of going to ownership going, trust me, this is the guy we need to go get. Trust me, it didn't work out, we're going to trade him away. Trust me, this is the guy we need to go get. Like, he is a whisperer of ownership. He knows how to get money and do things. Look what the Blue Jays are doing. The Blue Jays are in play for Juan Soto, okay? They're trying to go big. I think Ross Atkins knows he's probably going to go if this team doesn't reach expectations. I think Jerry Dipoto's number one job is to make sure he can get a big bet sign. And if it's not Pete Alonso, then maybe it's a Willie Adames who plays third base. They got to figure out some way to get a 30-homer type player in the middle of that lineup come opening day.
Hey, Greg, you mentioned just briefly Julio Rodriguez, and we've always said that this offense goes the way of Julio. And when Julio's hot, the offense is hot. But what are you seeing from him? Is he on the right trajectory, do you think, for his career?
There were moments, and I think, the great Harold Reynolds can look at a swing and recognize issues like immediately. And he kept talking about how late Julio Rodriguez was on fastballs. And there are approaches to let that pitch get deep, like really see it, because there's so much spin in the game. The sooner you can recognize it and not bite, not swing, and sit fastball, it's almost like they're beating him in his brain to really lay off the sliders. Like, we need you to recognize spin, so you got to let this pitch travel, which is a hard thing to do when all you've done is see ball, hit ball. I mean, that was his analytical approach to hitting his entire life, and it's always worked for him. But now we're telling these superstar athletes to think a lot. We want you to go up there and think a lot. So let this pitch travel deep. We need to make sure it's a fastball. It's not working for Julio Rodriguez, and he needs to be put in that leadoff spot, which I love that that's where they put him, and not overly focus on being a homer guy. I love that about Julio when he broke into the big leagues. He wasn't a kid that was trying to go deep every pitch. Yes, he had power, but it was a gap-to-gap kind of kid, and he showcased his speed so much more. I want to see him getting back to being a great hitter. It looks like it's very similar to when Aaron Judge gets in between, and he got in between during the postseason. Mm-hmm. When Aaron Judge is comfortable and he's attacking early in counts, you might see a couple bad swings. I totally get that. You get fooled on the slider. But we want our best players as the predator, not the prey who's trying to avoid the predator. And unfortunately, that's what Julio Rodriguez sort of became in 2024. You need him attacking psychologically at the plate. He's way too late on fastballs. Harold Reynolds is so right about that. And the more he's quick and he's early and he's jumping on stuff early in counts, you're going to see his numbers bounce back.
As I see it, this team needs almost an entirely new infield outside of J.P. Crawford, who he's got to prove himself. He took a big step back last year. But you currently don't have a third baseman, a second baseman, a first baseman. You got guys you can platoon, which I always hate, but, maybe that's going to be their avenue. But if you look at this team and say, all right, you need first, second, and third, you still need help in the bullpen, and we'll see what kind of resources they are, Jerry can convince them to part with, which it doesn't seem like much. But who do you look at within their budget, if you will? Not obviously looking at Alonso he would solve first base, but Who else? First base, second base, third base. Who comes to mind as realistic possibilities for this team?
So there's a guy that caught my attention, and I kind of always believe you are what you came up as. You guys can lose their way. Julio Rodriguez is a great example of this. I still believe he's a superstar. I think he's a 40-40, a perennial 40-40 type of center fielder. Truly, that's what I believe Julio Rodriguez. But there's a guy that was the Julio Rodriguez of the infield, if you think about it. And right now, I don't believe you'd have to give a gigantic contract to sign Gleyber Torres. Gleyber Torres, ever since the Yankees moved him up in the lineup, really, really bought into taking the ball the other way and became a good hitter again. If you go back and look at Gleyber Torres' numbers early on in his career, you were thinking, my goodness, he's the Julio of second base. Like, this is the kind we thought he was going to be a 40-homer second baseman. I really think you could buy low on Gleyber Torres because there are so many organizations that don't know what he is. But if you look at his second half and the way he played in the postseason on the biggest stage, the dude is oozing with talent. Is he going to win a Gold Glove? No. Is he a major upgrade to anything else the Mariners would have to put at second base? Absolutely yes. We're fixated on the 30-homer guy that the Mariners don't have. I get that. But if you could get a 20-homer bat at second base where you've got a Gold Glover at short and J.P. Crawford, and he's working with, I think I would label Gleyber as a sure-handed second baseman. Range isn't what J.P. Crawford's is at shortstop, and I get that. But I think a Gleyber Torres type would be a great move for the Seattle Mariners. I agree with you. It's not just a first baseman. It's not just one slugging bat. I said it's the number one priority, but they need another infielder. Whether it's a third baseman, a second baseman, they need another infielder because the starting rotation they have is better than everyone else's, in my opinion, in the American League. And it's shame on them for losing too many one-run games to let them showcase what they can do in a short series. Could you imagine the way playoff games are right now, where the Dodgers win a World Series with 3 starters, what the Mariners could throw at teams in a series with this collection of starting pitching depth? I mean, it's ridiculous how dominant they could be. They just have to get there. They're going to have to spend the money to do that.